president of the Washington Strategy Group. Joel, I wonder what you are watching for, sort of bigger picture, as we wait for this conference to begin.
Yeah, Elisa, it's great to be with you here. And I think first and foremost, we have to say that the system is working. Clearly, these meetings that Dan just described in Washington, the coordination at NORAD, the coordination with Northern Command, it demonstrates that when identifying these objects, that there is action being taken. But what happens with these objects is crucial. What I would like to understand is not only what happens with them, what will we learn from them, but where do we think they're coming from next? There were discussions over the past week that there were surveillance balloons from the PRC, from the People's Republic of China, heading from Latin America. Are there more coming now from the South? This clearly is a persistent problem, but it looks like the system is working, is now adjusting to this reality and understands how to respond.
I wonder if you can talk us through, for those of us who have not been in the room when these decisions are made, the national security considerations, the implications of shooting down unidentified objects.
Yeah, well, what we have are three very distinct shoot downs over this past week. Clearly, the first one, the PRC spy balloon flying over the United States, we tracked it. It was a diplomatic conundrum, clearly with China, and something to be sensitive to. So that had its own dimension. And there's all that interplay and interagency discussion about what does this mean for our diplomacy with China if we shoot this down? And how do we do it to protect American lives? These two recent cases, yesterday over Alaska, today it looks like over the Yukon, these are much more cut and dry in terms of they posted a danger. The one today, yesterday it looks like it was in airspace altitude at about 40,000 feet high. And so there had to be a very quick defense-oriented reaction to that. And regardless of the diplomatic repercussions, which there were none, clearly we haven't heard of any yet, that had to be taken down. The one today, it's interesting. It's a joint operation, as Dan mentioned, out of NORAD, a joint operation, U.S.-Canadian, demonstrating that both countries are tracking this now. No clear diplomatic angle yet, but when we find out what that stuff is and dissect it, I'm sure we'll have a better idea about where it came from.
Joel, in Dan DeLuce's reporting, he had some interesting analysis that we often hear about when it comes to matters of national security, of defense, which is this push and pull on transparency and the way in which the comments that we are going to hear today, that we are waiting to hear, likely can be influenced by things that happened earlier in the week. Walk us through, and they've clearly had briefings of their own behind closed doors where part of the conversation has been not just what information do we have, what information do we want to share, and on what timeline? What do those conversations look like?
Well, in an earlier world, and not that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, when there wasn't social media, when there weren't people with cell phones that could track with the powerful camera in their hand, this kind of information could be held back and potentially just ignored, and the public could be kept out of the discussion entirely. But that's just not the case anymore. And so what we've seen from national security leaders when they're speaking about this, they're trying to keep up in many ways with what the public is hearing about. And I think it's good that right now we saw over the last 48 hours a real effort to get out ahead of any potential media cycle of any third party identifying these balloons, recognizing in the national security community that they're going to be found, that these objects are going to be seen, that is. And it's good to explain early and not to allow misinformation. There was a lot of disinformation happening over the last week with the surveillance balloon floating over the United States. A lot of bad advice being given, quite frankly, about what to do about it. And I think our national security leadership saw that as a danger to the United States rather than a help. So getting ahead of it, in particular, when it goes right over the United States, seems to be where our leadership is heading right now. This is not something that it would have seen a couple of decades ago with this kind of public engagement.
I guess my next question is, are we getting more reports of unidentified objects over North America? Is this more than we ordinarily know about? I mean, give us some context for what it is we're watching here.
Yeah, you know, this does seem to be at a higher clip than what we have ever seen or heard of before. There have been instances, and there was clearly, you've tracked this in the past, a report about unidentified flying objects and sort of tracking that and categorizing that. But in particular, the PRC surveillance balloon fleet. These balloons that have traversed 5 continents over 40 countries, and that's an intentional act of surveillance with objects that are hovering. And that is distinct, and that is problematic. And the more that we see objects like we see that now, the attention is raised, and the NORADs and the Northern Command, which is our unified command covering all of North America through to Mexico, they are paying attention in ways that I think is pretty unique. We didn't see this in the days after 9/11 and in the days of the development of the Department of Homeland Security. That just wasn't at the pace that we're now beginning to see.
Joel Rubin, thank you so much for bringing your expertise to us tonight. Now, as we await